This deal is dead. I'm saying that in the least subtle way possible. 2 taps to the chest with the 12 gauge, shove a grenade in there, take out the pin, and just walk away. I got a call from a seller in Durham, North Carolina, and I do what I usually do. Walk the property, give him an offer, say, hey, do you want to list it or do you want to sell it directly? Which one do you want to do? He decided to go with another offer from another buyer. Perfectly fine. A couple weeks later, I look online and I see that it's listed under a limited listing. So I knew it was a novation. A novation is where you want to sell your house for, let's say, $100,000. I know it could sell for $150,000, but you just don't want to go through the hassle of listing it. I get it under contract with you for $100,000. I get permission from you to list it on the open market with a real estate broker. Your property sells, you get your $100,000. The broker gets their commission, I cover the closing costs, and I get what's left over. But in this case, the investor used what's called a limited listing. What that means is they pay a broker $400, $500 to put it on the MLS, and then all the calls, showings, and offers are actually organized and collected by the investor, and they handle the entire transaction. I personally feel this approach means the investor is acting as a broker, which is totally illegal, but that's inconsequential when it comes to this story. Seller signed an offer to purchase. Investor went ahead and listed it on the open market. The listing started at $325,000. I knew it wouldn't sell for that. I knew it was going to sell for around $280,000 in the current condition. So I know they were trying to get as much as they possibly could out of the deal. All of a sudden, I start seeing price drops. Now what this means to me is that each time a price drop happens, that investor is going back to the seller and saying, I need you to lower your price. And that's how the investor makes sure they're making their profit. I'm a very patient guy and the fortune's in the follow-up. So about 2 months later, I just keep checking on it and I notice that the listing is canceled. I reach out to the seller and say, hey, what's going on? He says, well, I still want to sell it, but obviously that didn't pan out. Totally makes sense. Do you want to take my cash offer or do you want to list on the open market to try to get as much money as you can? He wanted to list on the open market. Great, let's roll. I go through the listing process with him, we get it listed, and we get an offer in that is acceptable to him. Pretty awesome. I think the offer was $280,000 with $4,000 of seller paid closing costs. It's a really legit offer. He wanted about a day to review it and read over it, make sure he understood it, totally get it, ask me whatever you need. But while he was reviewing it, I get a call. This call was from a guy, I think his name was Alex, and he was with a company called Northwestern. Northwestern is essentially a pool of buyers. So if I have a property under contract, I can reach out to Northwestern and say, hey, I need a buyer for this. They bring the buyer, I get my piece, they get their piece, and we close. For example, you wanted to sell your house for $100,000. I got it under contract. I call Northwestern and they bring a buyer for, let's just say $120,000. You get your $100,000. We pay the closing costs, and then whatever's left over, Northwestern and I split 50-50. So this guy calls me and says, just so you know, your seller signed an agreement to purchase with another wholesaler, and that wholesaler is going to sue for specific performance. He told me we've already put a memorandum on the property, you're not going to be able to sell it, you may as well cancel the listing. Well, I'm a very analytical guy and I like to see proof in the pudding, and so I look it up. Absolutely, they put a memorandum on the property. A memorandum is literally just a letter that's notarized, and they file it at the Register of Deeds. What that means is there's now a cloud on the title, so even if my seller wanted to sell it, that buyer could literally stop the sale and say, no, we're not clearing the title because we have a contract. I digress. So this dude from Northwestern tells me we are going to sue for specific performance. What specific performance? Remember that contract for $100,000? Well, let's just say you all of a sudden decided, I just don't want to sell the house anymore. Legally in North Carolina, you can't do it. If I still want to buy it, you have to sell it. If you push back and tell me, no, I'm not going to sell it, well then all I do is bring you to court and the judge is going to make you sell it to me anyway at the price we agreed upon. What ended up happening in this situation was this buyer made the seller drop the price so much that it was down to $210,000. The seller had a loan on the property and was behind 2 months payments because he thought he was going to sell it, so he just didn't pay his mortgage. And he figured out at closing that he was only going to get $4,000 for the property, which means to me that this buyer did not help to educate that seller whatsoever. The seller was of the understanding that he would get all the $210,000 at closing and then he could just pay off the mortgage whenever. This is totally not the case. All right, so back to where we're at. I have an active listing. This guy says they're going to sue for specific performance. That means there is a material fact in play that this seller cannot sell. I contacted the Real Estate Commission, told them my thoughts, they confirmed it. I knew that seller could not sell. I then called an attorney, got them to confirm the exact same thing. I'm just glad that the seller did not sign that offer for $280,000 because at that point, we would have had 2 offers in play that he would have to satisfy. That would have been a complete crap story. But I don't take this laying down. I make sure that I get as much information as possible to confirm whether or not he could legitimately sell it. All roads pointed to ain't able to sell it. I then started communication with this buyer, but then this guy from Northwestern, he was like talking on behalf of the guy who had it under contract, and it just got all messy and everything. And honestly, the guy from Northwestern was really screwing it up because he was being very aggressive and matter of fact about, look, we are going to sue. But it turns out that that original buyer that held the contract, I never heard it from them. It was from this other guy who was just trying to get his piece. There's an ethical part to wholesaling that I just don't think a lot of people get. A lot of people put the money over the people, and unfortunately, that's just not something I can do. It ain't a part of my moral code. But ultimately, I had to cancel the listing. I had to put safety above all else, because if I had brought that listing to market, got him under contract with somebody, and then these guys sued for specific performance, and all of a sudden, he's got a contract with a new buyer, and he's getting sued to sell the property to them, he would have been in a world of hurt. The moral of this story, you can absolutely sell your property yourself. It's not a big deal. In fact, I've got a for sale by owner guide that I can send you for no charge. Just have it. If you like it, great. If you don't want to deal with it, call me. I got you covered. But just be mindful of the fact that when you sign an offer to purchase in the state of North Carolina, saying you will sell at this price on this day, you cannot back out of that. And if you try to, that buyer can sue you, take you to court, and make you sell. Give me 1 second. I need to grab a chair. All right, I'm back. Needed to get a chair.